He tossed a $50,000 check across the table like he was tipping a waiter. He told her she was simple. He told her she would be happier being nobody again. He did not even let her finish her sentence. If he had, he would have learned that the woman he just threw away was
Hi,
carrying
it's so
his
good
child.
to see you.
You
But
too.
Vesper
You look
Caldwell did
wonderful.
not
Thank
scream.
you. I'm so
She
excited.
did not cry.
Thưa các anh, doanh
She
số
did
quý trước
not
tăng
beg.
15%.
Rất tốt.
She
Chúng
picked
ta cần
up
lên kế
that
hoạch chuẩn bị
pen
tới.
Vâng,
and
tôi đề xuất mở
signed
rộng
her
thị trường.
name
Đồng ý.
in
Phân tích rủi ro đi.
silence. Then she walked out into the rain with nothing. No money, no home, no plan, just a baby in her belly and a rage so quiet it could burn a city down. 48 hours later, James Preston woke up to 47 missed calls. He grabbed his phone, clicked the first link, and his blood went cold. There on a grainy paparazzi video was the woman he had just discarded, walking up the steps of a $70 million private jet. And the man waiting for her at the top of those stairs was a ghost, a billionaire who had not been seen in public for a decade. James did not know it yet, but he had not just signed a divorce decree. He had signed his own destruction. This story is proof that silence is not weakness. It is a weapon. And the people who try to bury you always forget one thing. They are just planting seeds. If you have ever been told you are nothing, stay with me to the very end. This one is going to change how you see yourself. Now, before we begin, if stories like this hit you right in the heart, do me a quick favor. Tap that subscribe button and that little bell right next to it. It takes 1 second, it costs nothing, and it makes sure you never miss a story that might be exactly what you need to hear on a hard day. And if this one moves you, drop a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. Let us begin. The conference room at Whitmore and Associates smelled like leather and betrayal. That is not a metaphor. The chairs were Italian calfskin, the kind that cost more than a used car, and the betrayal was sitting at the head of the mahogany table in a bespoke navy suit from Savile Row, checking his Rolex for the third time in 60 seconds. James Preston looked like a man who had already won the lottery and was just waiting for someone to hand him the oversized check. He was 45 years old, handsome in the way that expensive grooming and arrogance can make any man handsome. And he radiated the kind of confidence that comes from never once being told no by anyone who mattered. Next to him sat his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gregson, who shuffled a stack of documents with the aggressive precision of a card dealer in a casino where the house always wins. Gregson charged $800 an hour. He was worth every penny if you were the one paying him. If you were on the other side of the table, he was a nightmare in a three-piece suit. And on the other side of the table sat Vesper. She looked small. That was the first thing anyone would notice. She looked small in the oversized leather chair, like a child sitting at the adults' table for the first time. She wore a simple, beige trench coat that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, exposing a neck that looked too fragile to hold up the weight of what was happening in this room. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. But here's what nobody in that room knew. Not James, not Gregson, not the receptionist who had offered her water with pity in her eyes. Nobody knew that Vesper Caldwell was 8 weeks pregnant. She had found out 11 days ago in the bathroom of the apartment she still technically shared with James, though he had not slept there in months. 2 pink lines on a pharmacy test that cost $6.99. She had sat on the cold tile floor and stared at those lines until they blurred, and she had known 2 things simultaneously. The first was that she was carrying a new life. The second was that the father of that life was about to throw her away like yesterday's newspaper. She had tried to tell him 3 times since then. Each time, James had been too busy, too distracted, too wrapped up in Lydia and her Instagram stories and her baby voice that called him Daddy, without a shred of irony. Vesper had swallowed the words, each time, like bitter medicine, and told herself she would find the right moment. This was not the right moment, but it was the last moment. Gregson cleared his throat. "Let us review the terms one final time," he said, his voice dripping with the kind of sympathy that was about as genuine as a $3 bill. "Mr. Preston retains the property on Mercer Island, the primary residence in Bellevue, and full ownership of Preston Dynamics. As per the prenuptial agreement, which we have successfully upheld, Mrs. Preston is entitled to a lump sum of $50,000. $50,000. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building his company from the ground up, 10 years of writing the business plans, crafting the pitch decks, staying up until 3 in the morning to rework financial projections while James slept. And her payout was $50,000. That was $5,000 a year, less than minimum wage. In exchange, Gregson continued, you waive all rights to future alimony, spousal support, and any claims on Mr. Preston's future earnings. He slid a pen across the polished table. It spun like a compass needle and stopped, pointing directly at Vesper. "It is a clean break, Vesper," James said. His voice was smooth and polished, like a stone that had been tumbled in a river of privilege until all the rough edges were gone. There was no trace in that voice of the man who had once promised to love her until death. Honestly, it is generous given the circumstances. The circumstances were currently sitting in James's car in the parking garage downstairs, scrolling through Instagram and chewing gum. Her name was Lydia Marks. She was 24 years old. She had 160,000 followers and a talent for spending James's money with the enthusiasm of a child in a candy store. With her parents' credit card, she called herself an influencer. The only thing she influenced was James's bank account, and always in the downward direction. Vesper did not look up from the document. The words blurred. Irretrievable breakdown of marriage, waiver of rights, total separation. The language was clinical, designed to strip the emotion out of the most emotional moment of a person's life. Lawyers were good at that. They could describe a stabbing as an unauthorized penetration of the epidermis and bill you $400 for the sentence. She fought. She had to try. "I wrote the business plan that landed your first $10 million contract, James," she said, and her voice was steady, stronger than she expected. "I built the pitch deck for Series B. I worked 80-hour weeks for your company, and you paid me nothing. Not a salary, not equity, not even a thank you." Gregson cut her off with the precision of a surgeon. "The prenuptial agreement is clear, Mrs. Preston. Contributions of a domestic nature do not constitute grounds for additional compensation under the terms of the—" "I was not domestic," Vesper said, and the sharpness in her voice made both men blink. "I was your unpaid chief strategy officer." The room went quiet for a moment. James leaned forward. His cologne reached her across the table, the same Tom Ford that used to make her feel safe when he held her. Now it just smelled like expensive lies. "Sign the papers, Vesper. Do not embarrass yourself." Vesper took a breath. This was it, the last moment. She had to tell him now, or she would never tell him. "James, I need to tell you something." He cut her off, like she was a telemarketer, interrupting his dinner. "You have nothing left to say that I want to hear. Sign it." She closed her mouth. She looked down at her stomach, hidden under the shapeless trench coat. No one noticed. No one was looking. She was already invisible to them. She picked up the pen. Her hand did not tremble. That was the first odd thing, though James was too arrogant to notice. A woman losing her marriage usually shook. She usually cried. She usually screamed about the years she had wasted. But Vesper was silent. She pressed the pen to the paper. The scratch of the nib was the loudest sound in the room. She signed her name. Vesper Caldwell. She dropped his last name with the stroke of a pen. She pushed the papers back across the table. Done, she said softly. James snatched the papers up, scanning the signature like he expected it to evaporate. Satisfied, he stood and buttoned his jacket, with the casual ease of a man closing a deal on a used car he had massively underpaid for. Well, that was easier than I thought. He pulled a check from Gregson's folder and tossed it onto the table, like he was tipping a valet. $50,000. Take care of yourself, Viv. You were never cut out for this world. The galas, the press, the pressure. You are a simple girl. You will be happier being simple again. He turned his back on her to shake Gregson's hand. Two men congratulating each other on successfully disposing of a woman. Vesper stood up. She was trembling now. But not from weakness, from restraint. She looked at the check on the table. $50,000. The price tag James Preston had put on a decade of her life. She did not touch it. James? He paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder with the expression of a man who has already mentally left the room. What? If you want the check, pick it up. I do not want the money, she said. Her voice had changed. There was something in it that had not been there before, a resonance, a depth. Like a bell that had just been struck. Keep it. You are going to need it more than I will, James laughed. It was a barking, cruel sound. I am worth $40 million, Vesper. I think I will be fine. Goodbye, James. She walked past him. She walked past Gregson and his stack of papers. She walked past the receptionist, who looked at her with pity so thick you could spread it on toast. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, she saw James shake his head and heard him say to Gregson, Pride, she will be back begging for that check in a week. Put it in escrow. The elevator descended. Vesper was alone. She put both hands on her stomach and leaned her head against the cold metal wall. I tried to tell him, she whispered to the life inside her. He would not listen. So it is just us now. The doors opened. She walked out of the skyscraper and into the pouring Seattle rain. She did not open an umbrella because she did not own one. She let the water soak into her coat, washing away the scent of Tom Ford cologne that seemed to cling to her like a ghost. She did not hail a taxi because she could not afford one. She walked 3 blocks to the bus stop and sat on the cold metal bench and waited for the number 57 to Tacoma. Vesper Caldwell walked out of that building with nothing. No money, no home, no plan. But she was carrying 2 things James Preston did not know about. One was a baby. The other was a rage so quiet it could burn a city down. And what happened next would change everything. But that part of the story starts with a laundromat and ends with a billionaire's jet. Stay with me. The studio apartment in Tacoma was the kind of place that made you wonder if the landlord had ever actually seen the apartment himself, or if he had just described it to a blind contractor over a bad phone connection and hoped for the best. The walls were thin enough that Vesper could hear her neighbor's television, his arguments with his girlfriend, and occasionally, disturbingly, his dental hygiene routine. The carpet was a color that might have once been beige, but had evolved through years of neglect into something closer to existential despair. There was a mattress on the floor, a coffee maker that worked approximately half the time, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot of a tire shop. Rent was $850 a month. That ate through her $50,000 safety net faster than she wanted to think about, especially since she had not actually taken the $50,000. She had walked away from the check. Pride is a luxury when you are pregnant and alone, but Vesper's pride was the only thing she had left that James had not managed to take, and she was not about to surrender it for a check that represented everything She despised about how he valued her. So she had nothing, truly nothing. She pawned her engagement ring on the second day. She walked into a pawn shop on Pacific Avenue, a place with bars on the windows and a man behind the counter who had clearly seen every form of human desperation and was no longer impressed by any of it. He examined the ring under a loupe, turned it over twice and said, 3,200. Vesper blinked. James told me it was worth $40,000. The pawnbroker looked at her with an expression that was not quite pity, but lived in the same neighborhood. Ma'am, this is cubic zirconia in a gold-plated setting. It is a nice fake, but it is a fake. A fake ring. For 10 years, Vesper had worn a fake engagement ring and believed it was real because the man who gave it to her told her it was. She stared at the pawn shop receipt for $3,200 and laughed. It was the kind of laugh that lives next door to crying, and the pawnbroker pretended to organize his display case so she could have her moment in semi-privacy. She took the $3,200 and walked back to her apartment in the rain. Seattle rain was not the dramatic, cinematic kind of rain. It was the slow, persistent, soul-crushing kind that got into your bones and stayed there, whispering that maybe things were never going to get better. She applied for jobs, 16 applications in the first week. She had a degree in business from the University of Washington. She had a decade of experience running strategy for a company that was now worth $40 million. On paper, she should have been snapped up immediately. But paper is not reality. The rejections came in waves. We appreciate your interest, but we are looking for candidates with more recent experience. Your qualifications are impressive, but the position requires someone with a current skill set. Unfortunately, you are overqualified for this role. Overqualified. That was the word that stung the most. It was corporate code for, you are too old and you have been out of the game too long and we do not know what to do with you. She was 38 years old with a 10-year gap on her resume that read homemaker, but should have read unpaid executive who built a $40 million company for a man who repaid her with a fake ring and a real mistress. Morning sickness hit in week 3. Not the gentle, manageable kind they showed in movies where the woman delicately presses a hand to her mouth and then carries on with her day. The real kind. The kind where you are on your knees on a bathroom floor at 5 in the morning, gripping the toilet bowl in a studio apartment in Tacoma, and the only thing in your stomach is saltine crackers and tap water, because that is all you can afford. She needed to see a doctor. She knew this. The baby needed prenatal care, vitamins, checkups, but her health insurance had been through James' company, Preston Dynamics, and it had been canceled the day the divorce was finalized. Gregson had seen to that. Clean break, he had called it. Clean for James, maybe. For Vesper, it was like being pushed out of an airplane without a parachute and being told to enjoy the view on the way down. Meanwhile, James was living his best life. She could not escape it. Social media was a window into his world that she could not stop looking through, even though every glance was a punch to the sternum. He posted photos with Lydia on a yacht in the San Juan Islands. Champagne on the deck. Lydia in a white bikini, her body the kind of taut and golden that only youth, genetics, and a complete absence of stress could produce. James's arm around her waist, his smile wide and white and obscene. The caption read, "New chapter, same incredible life, blessed and grateful." His PR team had spun the divorce as amicable. Diana Mercer, his publicist, crafted a statement that used words like mutual respect and different paths and wishing each other well. The internet barely noticed. Vesper was a footnote in someone else's story, a minor character written out of a the script, so the leading man could have a more exciting love interest. The worst night came on a Tuesday. Vesper was sitting in a laundromat at 11 at night, watching her only 3 outfits spin in the dryer. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting everything in a harsh bluish-white glow that made the room feel like a hospital waiting area for people whose lives had flatlined. A man in the corner was asleep with his mouth open, using a bag of dirty clothes as a pillow. A woman was folding tiny children's shirts with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times and would do it 10,000 more. Vesper checked her phone. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb fracture that she had covered with a piece of clear tape. James's latest Instagram photo loaded slowly over the laundromat's terrible Wi-Fi. It was a close-up of Lydia at dinner, laughing, her head thrown back, wearing a diamond necklace that caught the candlelight and scattered it like tiny explosions. The caption was a single heart emoji. That necklace cost more than everything Vesper owned, more than her apartment, more than her car, which she did not have, more than her bank account, which currently held $2,400 and was shrinking by the day. She put the phone face down on the folding table and called her mother. Ruth Caldwell answered on the second ring. She always answered on the second ring. First ring was too eager, third ring was too slow. Ruth was a retired school teacher from Columbus, Ohio, and she approached even phone etiquette with pedagogical precision. "How are you, honey? How is James?" The lie came out smooth and practiced. Vesper had been lying to her mother for weeks, and she was getting terrifyingly good at it. "Everything is fine, Mom. Just busy with the move." "The move? Where are you moving?" "Just downsizing. You know how it is. Seattle real estate." "You sound tired, sweetheart." "I am okay. How is the treatment?" Ruth hesitated. That pause, that tiny pause, was louder than any words could be. Ruth had been diagnosed with early-stage lymphoma 4 months ago. The chemo was brutal, but the prognosis was good if she stayed on the treatment protocol. If. The if was made of money, insurance, copays, medication costs, transportation to the hospital. Ruth was on a fixed income from her teacher's pension, and the costs were eating her alive. "We can talk about that later," Ruth said, which was Ruth language for, "The bills are crushing me, but I will die before I burden my daughter. Mom, if you need anything." "I am fine, Vesper. Now tell me, are you eating properly?" "You always forget to eat when you are stressed." Vesper looked at the vending machine in the corner of the laundromat. She had eaten a sleeve of saltine crackers and half a banana for dinner. "I ate a big dinner, Mom. Do not worry about me. That is my job, honey. It has been my job since the day you were born. I am not retiring from that one." After she hung up, Vesper sat in the plastic chair and stared at her reflection in the laundromat window. The rain streaked down the glass, distorting her face into something she barely recognized. She looked old, not 40 years old, old in the way that exhaustion and despair and hunger age a person in weeks rather than years. She put her hand on her belly. The bump was barely there, just a slight firmness below her navel that no one would notice under her trench coat. But she noticed. She noticed every minute of every day. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am going to figure this out. I just do not know how yet." The dryer buzzed. Her clothes were done. She folded them carefully, 3 outfits that represented her entire wardrobe, and put them in a plastic bag because she could not afford a laundry basket. She walked out into the rain and caught the last bus back to her apartment. She was broke. She was pregnant. She was alone in a laundromat at midnight while her ex-husband popped champagne on a yacht with a woman half his age. But rock bottom has a funny way of becoming a foundation. You cannot dig any deeper, so the only direction left is up. And what Vesper Caldwell did next would eventually bring a $40 million empire to its knees. It would just take a while, and it would nearly destroy her first. 4 more weeks passed, 4 weeks of saltine crackers and tap water and morning sickness and rejection emails and sleepless nights on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment in Tacoma where the walls were so thin she could hear her neighbor sneeze. But something else happened in those 4 weeks. Something quiet and almost imperceptible, like a seed cracking open underground where nobody can see it. Vesper started to work. Not a job. Nobody would hire her. But she had a laptop, a taped-together relic with a cracked hinge and a battery that lasted 45 minutes if she turned the screen brightness all the way down, and she had a brain that had been dormant for a decade and was now waking up angry. She started small, a posting on a freelance website. Business strategy consultant, financial modeling, market analysis, pitch deck development, 10 years experience. She priced herself low, embarrassingly low, because she could not afford to be proud about her hourly rate when she was choosing between prenatal vitamins and electricity. Her first client was a woman named Georgia who ran a small candle business out of her garage and needed help writing a business plan to apply for a bank loan. Vesper wrote that plan in 2 days. It was immaculate. Georgia got the loan. Georgia paid Vesper $400 and left a 5-star review that said, "I do not know where this woman has been hiding, but she is a genius." The second client came 3 days later. Then a third. Word spread the way word always spreads, about quality work, slowly at first, then all at once. Within a month, Vesper had 3 regular clients. Small startups, modest fees. She was not getting rich. She was getting by, and getting by when you have been drowning feels like flying. But she needed to see a doctor. She had been putting it off because the free prenatal clinic had a 3-week wait list. And because some small, terrified part of her brain whispered that if she went to the doctor and something was wrong with the baby, she would have to face it. And she was not sure she could face one more bad thing. Her capacity for bad things was full. The tank was empty. She was running on fumes and stubbornness and the ghost of her grandmother's voice saying that Caldwell women do not quit. Week 12. She went. The Southside Community Health Center was wedged between a dollar store and a tax preparation office in a strip mall that had seen better decades. The waiting room smelled like hand sanitizer and anxiety. Plastic chairs lined the walls. A television mounted in the corner played a daytime talk show at a volume that was either too loud or not loud enough, depending on whether you were trying to listen or trying to think. Vesper signed in. Name, address, insurance. She left the insurance line blank. The receptionist looked at the form, looked at Vesper, and said without judgment, "We have a sliding scale program. Based on your income, the visit today will be $12. $12. That was more than a sleeve of crackers, but less than the dignity of knowing her baby was healthy. She paid. The doctor was a woman named Dr. Ramirez, mid-50s, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the calm demeanor of someone who had delivered enough bad news to know that the delivery mattered as much as the content. She did the exam. She ran the ultrasound. 12 weeks, Dr. Ramirez said, turning the screen so Vesper could see. Your baby is healthy, strong heartbeat, development is right on track. Vesper stared at the screen. There it was, a tiny shape, a head, a body, limbs the size of matchsticks. It looked like a peanut, the most beautiful peanut she had ever seen. She cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from the bone-deep gratitude of learning that something in her life finally was going right. In a world where everything had been taken from her, this one thing was still hers, still healthy, still fighting. Dr. Ramirez handed her a tissue and a bottle of prenatal vitamins. Take these every day, no exceptions. You need to eat more. I know that is easier said than done, but your body is building another body right now, and it needs fuel. Here is a list of resources for uninsured mothers in the area. Food banks, WIC, maternity assistance programs. Vesper took the pamphlets and stuffed them in her bag next to the taped-together laptop. She held the ultrasound printout like it was a winning lottery ticket, which in a way it was. It was proof that something good could come from something terrible. She walked outside. The sun was actually shining for once, a rare break in the Seattle gray that felt like a personal gift from the universe. She sat on a bench outside the clinic and looked at the ultrasound photo one more time. Then she pulled out her phone and did something she had been avoiding for weeks. She called James. She did not call to beg. She did not call to plead. She called because despite everything he had done, despite the cruelty and the abandonment and the fake ring and the 24-year-old mistress, she believed that a father had a right to know that his child existed. Maybe it was naive, maybe it was foolish, but Vesper Caldwell had been raised by Ruth Caldwell, and Ruth Caldwell had taught her that doing the right thing was not optional, even when the other person did not deserve it. James picked up on the fourth ring. She could hear music in the background, a bass line, laughter, the clink of glasses. He was at a party. Of course he was at a party. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and normal people were at work, but James Preston was celebrating the life he had freed himself to live. "What do you want, Vesper? I am busy." "James, I am pregnant." The music seemed to get quieter, though she knew it was just the blood rushing in her ears. "The baby is yours. I found out before the divorce, but you would not let me speak. I tried to tell you in Gregson's office. You cut me off." Dead silence. The kind of silence that has weight and texture, the kind you can feel pressing against your eardrums. Then James spoke, and every word was a shard of ice. "That is not my problem anymore. You signed the papers. You waived your rights. And if you try to use some baby to squeeze money out of me, my lawyers will bury you in court until that kid is in college." "James, I am not asking for money. I am telling you that you are going to be a father. I am not going to be anything. Get rid of it or deal with it yourself. Do not call this number again." He hung up. The line went dead. The party noises vanished. Vesper sat on the bench with the phone pressed against her ear, listening to nothing. The dead tone ringing like a flat line. Get rid of it. The father of her unborn child just told her to get rid of it, like it was a piece of furniture he did not want, like it was an old coat she should donate, like the life growing inside her was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved with a phone call and a signature, the same way he had solved the problem of being married to her. She put the phone down. She looked at the ultrasound photo in her other hand, the peanut, the matchstick limbs, the strong heartbeat. She folded the photo carefully, precisely, and placed it in her wallet, right next to the pawn shop receipt for the fake engagement ring. The two documents sat side by side. One represented everything James had taken from her. The other represented everything he could never take. She stood up. She did not cry. She had cried in the laundromat. She had cried at the pawn shop. She had cried on the bathroom floor during morning sickness. She was done crying. The tears had been burned out of her by those 4 words, and something else had taken their place. Something cold and mechanical, like an engine turning over after a decade of rust. "Okay," she said to no one and everyone at the same time. "Okay." She walked to the bus stop and sat down to wait. She pulled out her laptop and opened it on her knees. The screen flickered. The battery was at 22%. She had maybe 30 minutes before it died. She did not waste a single one. She opened a browser and typed Preston Dynamics SEC filings. She started reading quarterly reports, annual statements, investor presentations. The language was dense, full of corporate jargon designed to sound impressive, while saying as little as possible. But Vesper had written most of these reports herself, back when she was James's invisible strategist, and she could read between the lines the way a musician reads between the notes. Something was wrong. The numbers did not add up. Revenue was up, but cash flow was down. The European expansion was projected to cost $300 million, but the funding sources were vague. There were references to strategic debt instruments and leveraged asset positions that sounded sophisticated but smelled like smoke. Where there is smoke, there is usually someone cooking the books. The bus came. She got on, laptop still open, scrolling through financial documents, while the number 57 lurched through traffic. The driver gave her a look. She did not notice. She was hunting. James Preston told her to get rid of his own baby. He thought that would be the end of the conversation. He had no idea. It was the beginning of his destruction. Because Vesper Caldwell did not just have a baby inside her. She had a decade of strategic brilliance that he had told her was worthless. She had an analytical mind that could tear apart a balance sheet the way a surgeon tears apart a tumor, and she had just found a reason to use all of it. 3 days later, she called Marcus Webb. Marcus was her friend from the University of Washington. They had been study partners in their junior year, pulling all-nighters in the library, fueled by bad coffee and mutual ambition. Marcus was smart, but not brilliant, hardworking, but not gifted. When he was failing his CPA exam for the second time, his confidence shattered, and his money running out, Vesper had tutored him every night for 3 months. Flashcards at midnight, practice problems at 2 in the morning, pep talks at 4. He passed. He got his certification. He got a job at a mid-level accounting firm in Chicago. He built a career and a family, and he had told Vesper 100 times that he owed her everything. She had never collected on that debt. Until now. Marcus, it is Vesper. I need a favor. Ves, my God, I heard about the divorce. Are you okay? Where are you? I am fine. I need you to look at some financial filings for me. Preston Dynamics. Something is not right with their numbers. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You want me to look into your ex-husband's company? I want you to look at a publicly traded corporation that appears to be committing securities fraud. That is what you do, right? Forensic accounting? Ves, I do not know if this is a good idea. If James finds out... Marcus, he told me to get rid of our baby. Another silence, longer this time. What? I am pregnant. 12 weeks. He told me to get rid of it, or deal with it, myself. And now I am dealing with it myself. Are you going to help me or not? Marcus took a breath that she could hear across 2 time zones. Send me the filings. I will look tonight. She sent them. Marcus dug in. Nights, weekends, early mornings, before his wife and 2 kids woke up. He used his firm's databases, pulling public records and cross-referencing them with industry benchmarks and regulatory disclosures. He was good at his job. He was methodical and careful and precisely the kind of person you wanted looking at numbers that someone else was trying to hide. What he found made his hands shake. He called Vesper on a Tuesday night. She was sitting on her mattress, eating ramen, 5 months pregnant now, and wrapped in a blanket because she kept the thermostat at 62 degrees to save on the electric bill. Ves, this is bad. How bad? Preston Dynamics is a house of cards. James has been cooking the books for at least 3 years. The European expansion is not funded by organic revenue. It is funded by leveraged debt that he has been hiding in a fake subsidiary. There is a shell company called Meridian Solutions that exists only on paper. No employees, no office, no revenue. It is just a bucket where James dumps losses so they do not show up on the quarterly reports. Vesper closed her eyes. What else? He took a second mortgage on the Mercer Island property. But here's the thing. The property is listed as a company asset, not a personal asset. He used the company's property as collateral for a personal loan. $200,000. The money went to a jewelry store. He bought a diamond necklace. The necklace. The one Lydia was wearing in the Instagram photo. The one that sparkled like tiny explosion in the candlelight, while Vesper sat in a laundromat counting quarters. He bought his girlfriend a necklace with company money. With pension fund money, Ves. The institutional investors on his board, the pension funds, they have no idea their money is being used to finance his girlfriend's jewelry collection. If this comes out, it is not just embarrassing. It is criminal. Securities fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud if any of it crossed state lines, which it did. Vesper sat in the silence of her apartment. The ramen was getting cold. The baby moved, a gentle, rolling sensation that she had started feeling 2 weeks ago. Not a kick yet. More like a wave, like the baby was turning over in its sleep, dreaming whatever babies dream about when they do not yet know how cruel the world can be put in. She was holding a bomb, a 30-page forensic analysis that could blow James Preston's empire to pieces. The question was, what to do with it? The answer came to her not in a flash of inspiration, but in a slow, tired realization. She did not want revenge. She did not want to destroy James for the sake of destruction. She wanted 3 things. Child support, so her baby could eat, her mother's medical bills covered so Ruth could fight the lymphoma without choosing between chemo and groceries, and a formal acknowledgement that James Preston was the father of this child. That was it. 3 things. 3 completely reasonable things that any decent man would have offered voluntarily. But James was not a decent man, so Vesper would have to negotiate. She drafted a letter. She wrote it in the careful, measured language of someone who had spent a decade writing corporate communications for a man who took all the credit. She addressed it to Gregson. She laid out what she knew without revealing how she knew it. She offered a deal. Proper child support and medical coverage for her and the baby. Her mother's lymphoma treatment funded. A signed acknowledgement of paternity. In exchange, silence. No press, no SEC complaint. No public exposure. She read it 3 times. She revised it twice. She sent it. Then she did something she had not done in months. She went shopping. Not real shopping. Thrift store shopping. She walked into a Goodwill on South Tacoma Way and found a small stuffed bear with a bow tie and a slightly crooked eye. It cost $1.50. She brought it home and put it on the pillow next to her head. I think we are going to be okay, she told her belly. Mama made a deal. She is being reasonable. He will see the logic. Everyone walks away quiet. Everyone is fine. She fell asleep with her hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle waves of her baby moving, and for the first time in months, she did not set an alarm because she did not have to be afraid of tomorrow. She should have been. Vesper thought she was being reasonable. She thought James would see the logic, cut a deal, and everyone would walk away quietly. She had no idea that she had just poked a rattlesnake, and rattlesnakes do not negotiate. They strike. Gregson read the letter twice. Then he picked up the phone and called James. We have a problem. James was on his yacht when the call came in. Lydia was sunbathing on the deck, her skin oiled and glistening. An influencer in her natural habitat. James had a glass of scotch in one hand and a cigar in the other, looking like a man in a cologne advertisement, all surface and no substance. What kind of problem? Your ex-wife knows about the Meridian subsidiary. The scotch glass stopped halfway to James's mouth. That is not possible. She does not have access to those files. She does not need access to the files. She has a forensic accountant, someone who can read the public filings and figure out what is behind them. She is offering a deal: child support, medical coverage, paternity acknowledgement, and her mother's cancer treatment. In exchange, she keeps quiet. She is bluffing. She is not bluffing, James. Her letter references specific transactions: the Mercer Island second mortgage, the jewelry purchase, she knows. James put the scotch down. His hand was steady, but his jaw was tight, the muscles working under the skin like he was chewing on something bitter. How much does she want? She is not asking for a lump sum. She is asking for child support, medical insurance, and her mother's medical bills. It is remarkably reasonable, actually. If you want my professional opinion, I do not want your professional opinion. I want her destroyed. Gregson paused. James, if we can settle this quietly. Quietly, she threatened me. The woman I gave 10 years of my life to, the woman I gave $50,000 to, the woman who could not even manage to be a proper wife. She is threatening me. She has some accountant digging through my company, and she thinks she can extort me? It is not extortion. She is offering to keep quiet in exchange for basic child support. Any family court judge in the country would. I do not care what a family court judge would do. I care about what I am going to do. And what I am going to do is make sure she never opens her mouth again. Find Carl Whitley. Gregson went quiet. He knew that name. Everyone in Seattle's legal community knew that name. Carl Whitley was a private investigator whose methods lived in the gray area between legal and criminal. A man who did not just find dirt on people, but manufactured it when the real thing was not dirty enough. James, I strongly advise against find him today. The phone went dead. Gregson stared at the receiver. He had been a lawyer for 23 years. He had represented liars, cheaters, embezzlers, and men who treated their wives like furniture. But something about the cold flatness in James's voice made him uncomfortable in a way he had not felt before. This was not a man protecting his interests. This was a man preparing to destroy someone for the crime of being right. Gregson found Whitley. It took one phone call. Carl Whitley was 52 years old, built like a refrigerator, and had the moral compass of a weather vane. He had worked for some of the wealthiest men in Seattle, and his specialty was making problems disappear. Not the problems themselves, of course, the people who were the problems. He did this by constructing narratives so damaging and so convincing that the target either gave up or became so discredited that nobody believed them anymore. He started following Vesper 3 days after James's call. He photographed her leaving the free prenatal clinic, making sure to capture the peeling paint on the building and the weeds growing through the cracked parking lot. He documented her crying in a supermarket parking lot when her debit card was declined for a $12 grocery purchase. He took pictures of her apartment building from angles designed to make it look as bleak as possible. The broken mailbox, the rusted fire escape, the graffiti on the dumpster. He talked to her landlord, who said she was quiet but always behind on rent. He talked to the cashier at the corner store, who said she bought a lot of crackers and not much else. Then Whitley delivered his file to James's legal team, and they built their narrative. They hired a psychiatrist named Dr. Leonard Moss. Dr. Moss had an office in downtown Seattle with leather chairs and diplomas on the wall and the demeanor of a man who could diagnose you with whatever you were paying him to diagnose you with. He had been disciplined twice by the state medical board, once for providing expert testimony that was later proven to be fabricated, and once for prescribing medication to a patient he had never actually examined. He still had his license because the medical board moved at the speed of continental drift, and because men like Dr. Moss always knew the right people. Dr. Moss reviewed Whitley's file, the photographs of Vesper looking exhausted, the surveillance footage of her crying, the descriptions of her living situation. Based on this evidence and absolutely nothing else, no interview, no examination, no actual contact with the patient, Dr. Moss wrote a 12-page psychological evaluation that concluded Vesper Caldwell suffered from acute delusional disorder with paranoid ideation, emotional lability, and behavioral patterns inconsistent with parental fitness. James's legal team filed 2 motions simultaneously. The first was a restraining order. James claimed that Vesper was harassing him with fabricated allegations, intended to extort money, and that she posed a danger to herself and others. The motion cited her erratic behavior, her unstable living conditions, and Dr. Moss's evaluation as evidence that she was spiraling into a mental health crisis. The second was worse. It was a preemptive motion to have any future custody claims dismissed on the grounds that Vesper was mentally unfit to parent. They were trying to take her baby before it was even born. The papers were served on a Thursday afternoon. Vesper was sitting in the waiting room of the prenatal clinic for her 16-week checkup. The same plastic chairs, the same buzzing fluorescent lights, the same daytime talk show on the television. A woman across from her was bouncing a toddler on her knee. Another woman was filling out paperwork with a pen she had borrowed from the receptionist. A man in a gray suit walked in. He looked out of place in this waiting room the way a shark looks out of place in a goldfish bowl. He scanned the room, locked eyes on Vesper, and walked over. Vesper Caldwell? Yes? He handed her a manila envelope. You have been served. He turned and walked out. Every woman in the waiting room watched him go. The receptionist shook her head slowly. She had seen this before. Vesper opened the envelope. She pulled out the documents. She read the first page. Her name. James's name. The words restraining order and mental instability and parental fitness swam before her eyes. She turned to the second motion, the custody preemption. She read the words grounds for dismissal of any and all parental claims, and the room tilted. Her hands started shaking, not a little tremor, a full, uncontrollable shaking that made the papers rattle against each other. The ultrasound photo she had been carrying in the front pocket of her bag slipped out and fell onto the linoleum floor, landing face up. The peanut, the matchstick limbs, the woman next to her, the one with the toddler, picked it up and handed it back with a look of pure empathy. The kind of look that passes between women who understand without needing to be told. Thank you, Vesper whispered. She folded the court papers carefully, precisely, the way she did everything when she was trying to hold herself together. She placed them in her bag. She put the ultrasound photo back in its pocket. She sat through her appointment. Dr. Ramirez said the baby was growing well, healthy, strong. Vesper nodded and smiled and said all the right things. And when Dr. Ramirez asked if everything was okay at home, Vesper said, "Everything is fine." Then she walked outside. She sat on the bench, the same bench where she had called James and been told to get rid of the baby. The rain was falling again because this was Seattle, and the rain was as reliable as gravity. She put her hands on her belly. It was visibly round now, impossible to hide under the trench coat. Anyone who looked at her could see that she was pregnant, and anyone who looked closely could see that she was terrified. He is trying to take you from me, she said to her baby. He threw us away, and now he wants to take you. He does not want you, but he does not want me to have you either, because that is what he does. He takes things from people just because he can. She paused. The rain ran down her face, indistinguishable from tears. I will not let him. I do not know how yet, but I will not let him. She sat on that bench for a long time. The rain came down. The buses came and went. She did not move. She was thinking. The machine was running. James Preston did not just reject his child, he was trying to erase her, to legally prove that the mother carrying his baby was insane, so that when the baby was born, he could swoop in and take custody or block it entirely. Not because he wanted the child, because he wanted to punish Vesper for daring to fight back. And the worst part? In the American legal system, with enough money and the right lawyers, it almost works. Almost. But almost is not the same as always. And James Preston had made one critical mistake. He had assumed that Vesper Caldwell was alone. She was not. She just did not know it yet. 2 days later, Vesper walked into the downtown Seattle legal aid clinic. She arrived at 8 in the morning. The doors did not open until 9. She was first in line. The clinic was on the 6th floor of a building that smelled like carpet cleaner and desperation. The elevator was slow. The hallways were narrow, and every surface had the worn, exhausted look of a place where too many people needed help and not enough people were providing it. She waited 3 hours. She sat in a plastic chair with her bag on her lap and her hands on her belly and her jaw set in the expression of a woman who would wait 3 years if that is what it took. Other people came and went. A man who needed help with an eviction, a woman fighting for a protection order, a grandmother trying to get custody of her grandchildren. The parade of human suffering in a legal aid clinic would break your heart if you let it. But Vesper was done letting things break her. At 11:15, a door opened and a young woman appeared. She was short, dark-haired, with circles under her eyes that suggested she was intimately acquainted with the 3 in the morning side of every day. She wore a blazer that looked like it came from the same Goodwill where Vesper shopped, and she carried a stack of files thick enough to use as a weapon. Vesper Caldwell, I am Priya Vasquez. Come on back. Priya's office was a closet with a desk. That is not an exaggeration. It had literally been a storage closet before someone put a desk in it and called it an office. There were no windows. The lighting was a single, overhead fluorescent that hummed at a frequency designed to cause migraines. Priya had 40 active cases, earned $52,000 a year, and had not taken a vacation in 14 months. She read James's filings in silence, while Vesper sat and waited and tried not to watch the clock. Priya put down the last page and looked at Vesper. This is aggressive, but beatable. The psychiatrist, Dr. Moss, he has been sanctioned before. His evaluation is garbage. He never met you, never examined you, never even spoke to you on the phone. He wrote a 12-page diagnosis based on photographs of you looking tired, which, no offense, every pregnant woman in America looks tired. But the custody preemption is dangerous. If a judge buys their narrative before the baby is born, even temporarily, it sets a precedent. You would be fighting uphill for years. It would drain every dollar you have and every dollar you do not have. So what do I need? You need to prove his motive. If we can show the judge that James is not attacking you because he is concerned about your mental health, but because he is trying to prevent you from exposing his financial crimes, the whole thing collapses. His legal strategy only works if you look crazy. If we prove you are right, you do not look crazy anymore. You look like a whistleblower. I have evidence, a forensic analysis. My friend Marcus, Then get him to sign an affidavit. We get that affidavit in front of a judge, and James's restraining order falls apart like a cheap umbrella in a hurricane. Vesper nodded. She felt something she had not felt in weeks. Not hope. Exactly. Hope was too bright a word for this feeling. It was more like a pilot light being lit in a dark room. Small, flickering, easily extinguished, but warm. Priya. Yes. I cannot pay you. Priya smiled for the first time. It was a tired smile. The smile of a woman who had heard those exact words from 100 clients and would hear them from 100 more. That is literally why this office exists. I get paid whether you can pay me or not. So, let us stop talking about money and start talking about how we are going to beat this guy. Vesper had a mother who believed in her, a lawyer who would fight for free, and evidence that could bring down a $40 million company. She thought she finally had enough, but she did not know that James had already found her weak spot, and he was about to rip it apart. The forensic analysis took 3 more weeks to finalize. Marcus worked nights and weekends, cross-referencing public records with industry data, tracing transactions through shell companies, and building a document so thorough and so damning that any SEC investigator would have wept with joy at the sight of it. 30 pages, single-spaced, every fraudulent entry highlighted, every hidden transfer mapped, every fake subsidiary exposed. The Meridian Solutions Shell Company, the second mortgage on Mercer Island disguised as a company asset. The $200,000 personal loan used to buy Lydia's diamond necklace with pension fund money. The fabricated revenue projections for the European expansion, the cooked books going back 3 years. Marcus called Vesper on a Thursday night to review the final document. It is bulletproof, Ves. I have triple-checked every number. If you file this with the SEC, they will open an investigation within a week. James will not be able to hide. And you will sign an affidavit? Marcus hesitated. It was a tiny hesitation, barely a heartbeat. Of course. Send me the draft. But here is what Vesper did not know, and what Marcus was too ashamed to tell her. To access some of the data he needed, Marcus had used his firm's proprietary database in ways that were not strictly authorized. He had logged into financial systems using his corporate credentials to pull records that he was not technically cleared to see. In his firm's employee handbook, this was a violation of the acceptable use policy. In a federal courtroom, with the right prosecutor, this could be construed as unauthorized access to protected financial systems, a felony. Up to 5 years in federal prison. Marcus told himself it was a gray area. He told himself it was for a good cause. He told himself that nobody would ever find out. Vesper took the analysis and acted on 2 fronts. First, she sent it anonymously to the 3 institutional investors on Preston Dynamics' board of directors, the pension fund managers, the people who actually cared about whether the money was being managed responsibly or being used to buy designer handbags for the CEO's 24-year-old girlfriend. She used a secure email account, a disposable address, and she sent the 30-page analysis without a cover letter. The numbers spoke for themselves. Second, she filed a formal whistleblower complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This was not a casual email. This was a legal filing, documented and time-stamped, alleging securities fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of corporate assets by the CEO of Preston Dynamics. The SEC has a process for these things. It is slow and bureaucratic and maddeningly impersonal, but it is a process. And once you are in the process, you are in the system, and the system, for all its flaws, is very hard to stop once it starts moving. It worked. Within a week, the SEC opened a preliminary investigation. Nothing public, nothing dramatic, just a team of analysts in Washington requesting documents from Preston Dynamics' legal department. But the mere fact of the investigation was enough to spook the institutional investors. They demanded an emergency audit. The board scheduled an extraordinary meeting. James was forced to delay the European expansion signing. Preston Dynamics stock dropped 6% in 2 days. Financial Twitter lit up. Something is rotten at Preston Dynamics. Insider tip: PD is about to get hammered. Short this stock immediately. James, for the first time in his adult life, was on defense. And Vesper, for the first time in months, felt safe. She allowed herself one night of not being afraid. She walked to the grocery store and bought a chocolate cake for $4.99. She brought it home to her studio apartment, sat on the mattress on the floor, and ate a slice with a plastic fork while the baby moved inside her. "We did it, baby girl," she whispered. She did not know the gender. She would not find out for another month, but she was already calling the baby she because it felt right, because every time the baby moved, it felt like a tiny girl flexing her fists. Mama did it. The system is going to work. The truth is going to come out, and we are going to be okay. She fell asleep with her hand on her stomach and the laptop still open to the SEC filing confirmation page. The stuffed bear with the crooked eye watched from the pillow. She should not have slept so well, because for one night, Vesper Caldwell believed she was safe. She believed the system would work. She believed truth was enough. She was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. In the world James Preston built, truth does not matter. Only power matters. And James still had plenty of it. The attack came 48 hours later. It did not come at Vesper. James's lawyers had learned that lesson. Attacking Vesper directly had not worked. The restraining order was flimsy. The psych evaluation was fabricated. Vesper was too sympathetic, a pregnant woman fighting for her baby. No judge in America was going to side with the rich CEO who told his pregnant wife to get rid of the child. So they attacked Marcus. It took Gregson's team less than a day to trace the forensic analysis. The methodology was distinctive, the work of a trained forensic accountant using specific databases and specific tools. They contacted Marcus's firm. They requested access logs. And they found exactly what they needed. Marcus Webb had accessed confidential financial databases using his firm's login credentials to pull data he was not authorized to see. The queries were time-stamped. The downloads were logged. The trail was clean and clear and damning. Gregson made the call himself. He did not delegate this one. Some threats are too important to outsource. "Mr. Webb, my name is David Gregson. I represent James Preston and Preston Dynamics. I am calling to inform you that we have evidence that you accessed protected financial systems without authorization in connection with a fraudulent forensic analysis commissioned by Vesper Caldwell." Marcus's blood went cold. The penalties for unauthorized access to protected financial systems under federal law include up to 5 years imprisonment and fines of up to $250,000. We also have grounds to file a civil suit against you and your firm for breach of fiduciary duty and tortious interference. I was using publicly available, Mr. Webb. We have the access logs. We know which databases you used. We know when you accessed them. We know what you downloaded. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. Marcus sat at his desk in his Chicago office, staring at a photograph of his wife and 2 children. Emma, who had just started kindergarten. Nathan, who was 3 and still slept with a stuffed dinosaur. His wife Sarah, who worked part-time at a library because they could not afford daycare for both kids. "What do you want?" Marcus whispered. "We want you to sign an affidavit stating that the forensic analysis was produced using falsified data provided by Vesper Caldwell. That she coerced you into producing a fraudulent report, that you were an unwitting participant in her scheme to extort money from her ex-husband. That is not true. Truth is a luxury, Mr. Webb, one that men with children in kindergarten cannot always afford. Sign the affidavit and the criminal referral disappears. Refuse, and we file with the FBI tomorrow morning. Marcus stared at the phone for a long time after Gregson hung up. He looked at the photograph of his children. He looked at the forensic analysis on his screen. He looked at the ceiling and the walls and the door, as if searching for an exit that did not exist. Then he called Vesper. It was midnight. She answered on the first ring because pregnant women in crisis do not sleep deeply, and the phone was never far from her hand. Ves? His voice was cracked. She knew that sound. It was the sound of a man who had already made his decision and hated himself for it. Marcus, what happened? They found the database access. They know I used my firm's credentials to pull the data. It is a federal charge, Ves. Unauthorized access, up to 5 years. Marcus, you did not do anything wrong. The data was, I accessed systems I was not authorized to access. You know I did, and they know it. They have everything. The timestamps, the downloads, everything. We can fight it. Priya says, I have 2 kids, Vesper. Emma just started kindergarten. She comes home every day and tells me about the letter of the day and the song she learned and the friend she made who has the same shoes as her. I cannot go to prison. I cannot be the father who went to prison. Long pause, the kind of pause that stretches like a rubber band until it snaps. I am sorry, Ves. I signed their affidavit this morning. Marcus, I told them you gave me falsified data. I told them you coerced me into producing a fraudulent report. That is a lie. I know. You know what this means for me? I know what it means, and I am sorry. I am so sorry. But I have my own family to protect, and I cannot. I just cannot. He was crying. She could hear it. The wet, ragged breathing of a man being pulled apart by his own weakness. Marcus, I understand. You do? No. But I am saying it because I do not have the energy to hate you right now. She hung up. Vesper sat in the dark apartment. The chocolate cake from 2 nights ago was still on the counter, half eaten, the frosting hardening. The laptop screen glowed with the SEC filing confirmation, which was now worthless because her only witness had just testified that she was a liar. The dominoes fell fast. Without Marcus's corroborating testimony, the SEC investigation stalled. The agency did not have the resources to pursue a case where the primary evidence had been recanted by the person who produced it. The investigation was not closed, but it was shelved, which in government language means the same thing. James's lawyers moved next. They filed a defamation suit against Vesper personally. $10 million. The suit alleged that Vesper had fabricated financial data and disseminated it to investors and government agencies with the intent to damage James Preston's reputation and business. $10 million. Vesper had $3,800 in her bank account. And then the final blow. The restraining order hearing was moved up. It was now scheduled for the following week. Vesper would have to appear in court, 7 months pregnant, and defend herself against the accusation that she was mentally unstable, with her only evidence now officially deemed fraudulent by her own witness. She sat on the floor of her apartment. The baby was awake, moving, turning. She could feel the rolls and shifts, the tiny body adjusting itself inside her. 6 months of pregnancy, 6 months of fighting, 6 months of being crushed and getting up and being crushed again. She looked at her phone. James's number was still in her contacts. She had never deleted it. Some part of her had held on to it the way you hold on to a fire extinguisher, not because you want to use it, but because you know you might have to. She picked up the phone. She started dialing. Maybe if she called him, maybe if she begged, maybe if she said she was sorry, she was wrong. She made it all up. Please just drop the lawsuits. Please just let her keep the baby. Maybe surrender was not weakness. Maybe it was just survival. Maybe there was no shame in losing when the other side had 4 lawyers and $40 million, and you had a legal aid attorney and a mattress on the floor. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then the baby kicked. Not a flutter, not a wave. A kick. Hard, sharp, unmistakable, like a tiny fist pounding on a door from the inside. Vesper gasped. She dropped the phone. Her hand flew to her belly. The baby kicked again, harder. A second kick, then a third, like the baby was saying something in the only language she knew. A language of movement and urgency and refusal. I am here, Mom. Do not you dare give up. Vesper stared at her stomach. Tears streamed down her face. Hot, fast, unstoppable. But they were not tears of defeat. They were the tears of a woman who had just been pulled back from the edge by something smaller than a cantaloupe. Something shifted inside her. Not just the baby. Something deeper. Something that lived in the part of her brain that James had spent 10 years trying to kill. The part that could see patterns and connections and angles that nobody else could see. The part that could take 1,000 pieces of scattered data and arrange them into a picture so clear and so devastating that it could bring empires down. She picked up the phone. She did not call James. She opened her laptop. The battery was at 11%. She plugged it in. The charging cable was frayed, and she had wrapped it in electrical tape. But it worked. It always worked, like her. She started typing. That baby kick saved 2 lives that night, Vesper's and her daughter's. Because in that moment, sitting on the floor of a studio apartment in Tacoma with nothing but a laptop and a heartbeat, Vesper Caldwell stopped being a victim. She became something far more dangerous. She became a mother with nothing left to lose. She wrote for 7 hours straight. The laptop hummed on the floor next to the mattress. The charger glowed orange, fighting to keep the battery alive. Vesper sat cross-legged, her belly resting on her thighs, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the precision and fury of a woman who had finally stopped being afraid and started being angry. She did not need Marcus. She had never needed Marcus. What she needed Marcus for was corroboration, a second pair of expert eyes to validate what she already knew. But the analysis itself, the real work, that had always been hers. Marcus had used fancy databases and proprietary tools, but Vesper had something more powerful. She had 10 years of institutional knowledge. She had sat in the room when James made the decisions. She had written the reports that disguised those decisions. She knew where every body was buried because she had dug most of the graves herself, and now she was going to dig them all back up. She started from scratch. No databases, no proprietary tools, nothing that could be challenged on procedural grounds. She used only publicly available information, SEC filings, annual reports, quarterly earnings calls, which were recorded and transcribed and available on Preston Dynamics' own investor relations page, county property records, which were public, corporate registration documents for Meridian Solutions, which were filed with the state of Delaware and available online for a search fee of $2. She cross-referenced revenue claims against industry benchmarks. She mapped the cash flow discrepancies quarter by quarter. She identified the exact moment 3 years ago, when the numbers stopped making sense, when revenue kept climbing, but cash reserves kept shrinking, when the company started borrowing from its future to pay for its present. She found the Mercer Island property transfer. It was in the county recorder's database. James had transferred the property from his personal name into Preston Dynamics corporate holdings 2 years ago, which meant it was now a company asset. 6 months later, he took a second mortgage against that asset, a personal loan for $200,000 routed through a bank in the Cayman Islands. The money trail was not hard to follow if you knew what you were looking for, and Vesper knew what she was looking for because she had been the one who set up the original corporate banking structure a decade ago. She found the Meridian Solutions Shell Company, incorporated in Delaware, which required minimal disclosure. No employees, no revenue, no physical address, just a name on a piece of paper and a bank account that received regular transfers from Preston Dynamics' operating fund. Those transfers were labeled research and development consulting fees in the quarterly reports. But Meridian Solutions did not do research. Meridian Solutions did not do anything. It was a bucket, a place to dump losses so they did not show up where investors could see them. By 4 a.m, she had rebuilt the entire analysis without using a single piece of data that could be challenged. Every source was public. Every calculation was verifiable. Every conclusion was logical, inevitable, and devastating. By 6 a.m, she had written 5,000 words of narrative, explaining what the numbers meant, not in the dry technical language of an accounting report, in plain English, the kind of language that a journalist could understand, the kind of language that a Twitter user could retweet, the kind of language that a mother sitting in her living room could read and say, "Oh my God, this man stole from pension funds to buy his girlfriend a necklace." She titled it "The Numbers Do Not Lie," an open letter to the board of Preston Dynamics. She read it one final time. She checked every number. She verified every source. She fixed 2 typos. Then she published it on Medium at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. She closed her laptop, lay back on the mattress, and slept for 2 hours. The baby slept too, or at least stopped kicking, which Vesper chose to interpret as approval. She woke up to chaos. Her phone, the cracked ancient thing with the tape on the screen, was buzzing like a broken alarm clock. She had 17 notifications, which was 16 more than she usually got in a day. She opened her browser. The Medium article had views, a lot of views. By noon, it was on the front page of Hacker News, a community of tech professionals and finance nerds who loved nothing more than a well-researched takedown of corporate fraud. By 3 p.m, former Wall Street analysts were independently verifying her numbers on Twitter, running their own calculations, and arriving at the same conclusions. By 6 p.m, Bloomberg published a story with the headline, "Anonymous Whistleblower Alleges Systematic Fraud at Preston Dynamics. The numbers are damning." By midnight, the article had 2 million views. The comments section was a war zone of support. This woman rebuilt a forensic analysis using only public data. While pregnant, while broke, while being sued, somebody give her a medal. I just ran the cash flow numbers independently. She is right. Preston Dynamics is a ticking bomb. Short PD immediately. This company is going to zero. Who is Vesper Caldwell? Because I want to hire her. But the most important reader was not on Twitter or Hacker News or Bloomberg. The most important reader was sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment in Belltown, Seattle, drinking wine and reading the article on her phone with an expression that moved from surprise to recognition to cold, calculating fury. Diana Mercer had been James Preston's publicist for 4 years. She was good at her job. She was possibly the best Crichton communications specialist in the Pacific Northwest, a woman who could take a catastrophe and spin it into an opportunity, who could make a guilty man look sympathetic and a sympathetic woman look crazy. She had done it for James more times than she could count. But 3 months ago, James had stopped paying her. She did not realize it at first. The January payment was late, but payments were sometimes late. The February payment did not come at all. She sent invoices. She sent reminders. She sent firm but professional emails that said things like, "Per our agreement," and "Please remit at your earliest convenience." She was ignored. Then last week, while looking for a signed contract in James's office, a contract she needed to prove to her own accountant that the money was owed, she found a receipt in his desk drawer, a purchase from an Hermes boutique on Madison Avenue, $45,000, a Birkin bag, for Lydia. Diana did the math. Her January, February, and March salary totaled $42,000. James had taken the money that was supposed to pay his publicist and used it to buy his girlfriend a handbag. He had not even bothered to hide the receipt. Diana Mercer was not a good person. She was not motivated by justice or empathy or moral outrage. She was motivated by the same thing that motivates a wasp when you step on its nest. She had been wronged, and she was going to sting. She read Vesper's article. She recognized the truth in it because she had seen the internal communications that proved it. She had emails from James to Gregson discussing the debt restructuring. She had text messages where James joked about making the baby problem disappear. She had meeting notes where James explicitly told his CFO to bury the meridian numbers deeper. She had the receipts, all of them. Diana created a Proton Mail account, anonymous, encrypted, untraceable. She drafted an email to Vesper Caldwell. "I was his publicist. He stopped paying me 3 months ago so he could buy his girlfriend a $45,000 handbag with my salary. I have internal communications that prove everything in your article. Emails, texts, meeting notes. I will testify. But you have to protect me. He will try to destroy me the same way he tried to destroy you." She sent it at 2 in the morning. Vesper saw the email at 6 when she woke up. For her morning routine of prenatal vitamins, crackers, and checking whether the world had ended while she slept. She read it twice. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was calm. This was the piece she had been missing. Her analysis was bulletproof, but it was circumstantial. She could prove that the numbers were wrong, but she could not prove that James knowingly falsified them. Diana could. Diana had the internal proof. The emails where James discussed the fraud in his own words. The texts where he showed not just knowledge, but intent. Vesper wrote back one line, "I will protect you, because nobody protected us." Diana read the reply and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just formed an alliance based not on friendship, but on a shared enemy, and shared enemies make for the strongest alliances in the world. James Preston spent millions trying to silence one woman. He forgot about the other woman he was screwing over, the one who had copies of every email he ever sent. And Diana Mercer was not just angry, she was the most dangerous kind of angry. She was an angry woman who knew where all the receipts were. Literally. Vesper had the truth. She had the numbers. She had a witness from inside the enemy camp. But she did not have power. Truth without power is just noise. She had learned that lesson the hard way when Marcus flipped and the SEC shelved its investigation. Being right did not matter if the other side could outspend you, outlawyer you, and outlast you. James had $40 million, 4 lawyers, and the institutional weight of a publicly traded company. Vesper had a goodwill blazer and a legal aid attorney. She needed leverage, real leverage. the kind that comes with capital letters and a checkbook that can make corporations tremble. She sat on her mattress at 3 in the morning, laptop open, baby kicking, and scrolled through an old email archive. An email account she had not logged into in over a decade. From a time before James, before the marriage, before the slow erasure of everything she used to be. She found what she was looking for in a folder labeled Roth Capital 2013. Alexander Roth. The name brought back a rush of memories so vivid she could almost smell the coffee. 12 years ago, Vesper Caldwell was 26 years old and hungry. She had graduated with honors from the University of Washington, turned down 3 corporate offers because she wanted to work somewhere that mattered, and landed a junior analyst position at Roth Capital, a venture capital firm run by a man named Alexander Roth, who was equal parts brilliant and terrifying. Roth was in his mid-40s then, already wealthy, already legendary in certain circles. He was the kind of investor who did not follow trends, but created them. He had made his first fortune betting against the dot-com bubble. He had made his second fortune betting on emerging markets when everyone else was running away from them. He was quiet, intense, and he had an unnerving habit of staring at you for 10 seconds before responding to anything you said, as if he was running your words through an internal algorithm to determine whether you were worth his time. Vesper was terrified of him for the first 3 months. Then she pitched him a deal. She had found a logistics company based in Ohio that everyone else had passed on. The company was small, unglamorous, and operated in a sector that was about as exciting as watching concrete dry. But Vesper saw something in the numbers that nobody else saw. She saw efficiency. She saw scalable infrastructure. She saw a company that was one capital injection away from dominating the Midwest distribution market. She put together a pitch deck, not a flashy one, a smart one. She presented it to Roth in a conference room on a Friday afternoon when everyone else had gone home. He listened without interrupting for 20 minutes. Then he stared at her for 10 seconds. "How much?" he asked. "12 million. We will see 300% return in 4 years." He invested. The return was actually 410%. The deal made Roth Capital $200 million. After that, Roth stopped being terrifying and started being respectful. He offered Vesper a partnership, a corner office, equity, a seat at the table where the biggest decisions were made. She turned it down. James Preston had asked her to marry him 3 weeks earlier. He was charming and handsome, and he told her that he needed her, that his company needed her, that she was the smartest person he had ever met, and he could not build Preston Dynamics without her. She believed him because she loved him, and because she did not yet understand that James Preston was the kind of man who consumed people the way fire consumes oxygen, completely and without gratitude. She resigned from Roth Capital on a Thursday. Roth walked her to the elevator. He did not smile. He did not say congratulations. He said one sentence: "You are making a mistake, but if you ever need to think clearly again, call me." She never called. For 12 years, she never called. She buried that phone number and that life and that version of herself under a decade of marriage and self-doubt and the slow, grinding erosion of being told every day that she was not as smart as she thought she was, until now. She found the number. She did not hesitate. She dialed. The phone rang 3 times. A voice answered. It was older, rougher, but unmistakable. The voice of a man who did not waste words. "Who is this?" "Alexander, this is Vesper Caldwell. I have a deal for you." Silence. The Roth silence. 10 seconds. "Vesper." He said her name like he was confirming the identity of someone he had expected to hear from eventually. I read your Medium article. Then you know the numbers are real. I know your analysis is the best piece of forensic work I have seen in a decade. I also know that you are 6 months pregnant, living in Tacoma, and being sued for $10 million by your ex-husband. I keep up. Vesper almost laughed. Of course he kept up. Alexander Roth kept up on everything. Then you know I am not calling for charity. If you were calling for charity, I would hang up. What do you have? She laid it out. Cold, clean, precise. The Vesper Caldwell that Alexander Roth had known 12 years ago. The one who could dissect a balance sheet the way a surgeon dissects a body. Preston Dynamics is leveraged to the breaking point. James has been hiding losses in a shell company and cooking the revenue numbers for 3 years. The European expansion is unfunded. The debt has been sold by the originating bank to a distressed asset fund called Hargrove Capital. Current market price is approximately 60 cents on the dollar. Meaning the debt is available for purchase. If your firm buys it, you own the leverage. You call the loan. James cannot pay. You force a restructuring. New management, new board, new strategy. The company's fundamentals are actually strong underneath the fraud. Clean it up, refocus on the core business, and you are looking at 300% return within 2 years. And who would the new management be? Me. Another silence. Longer this time. She could hear him thinking. You want to take over your ex-husband's company. I want to take over a company I built. He just put his name on it. You always did see what nobody else could see. A pause. Send me the full analysis. I already did. Check your email. She heard the click of keys. Then quiet as he opened the disk and she did not. I will have my team review this by morning. If the numbers hold, and I suspect they will, because you never were wrong about numbers, I am in. But, Vesper, yes, this is not charity. If I invest to win, and the terms will be aggressive. I would not expect anything less. I have a partnership structure drafted. 60-40, my favor, with a 5-year buyout option. And I need one more thing. Name it. I need a ride to Paris. The board meeting is next week. Alexander Roth laughed. It was a rare sound, dry and genuine, the laugh of a man who appreciated audacity because he recognized it as a form of intelligence. I think I can arrange that. Vesper hung up the phone. She sat on her mattress in the dark. The baby was moving, rolling, settling. She put her hand on her belly. Mama just made a phone call, baby girl, and everything is about to change. She did not sleep that night, not from fear, from anticipation. The machine was running at full speed now, and it had a target. Vesper did not beg a billionaire to save her. She walked up to one of the smartest investors in the world, 6 months pregnant and dead broke, and pitched him a deal so good he could not say no. She did not need a knight in shining armor. She needed a business partner. And she found one by being the smartest person in the room. 2 days later, Alexander Roth's team confirmed the numbers, every figure, every calculation, every projection. Vesper was right. She was always right. Roth called her back. We are in. The deal closes tomorrow. I am buying Hargrove Capital's position and taking over the debt. Phoenix Ventures will be the holding entity. Your name, your control, my capital. And the jet? King County International, private terminal. Thursday at 9 in the morning. Do you have something to wear? Vesper looked at her closet. 3 outfits from the laundromat, a maternity dress from Goodwill, and a black blazer she had found on a clearance rack for $12 that she had taken in herself with a needle and thread to make it fit. I have exactly what I need, she said. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, King County International Airport. Vesper arrived in an Uber that cost her $14. She made a mental note to deduct it as a business expense when she had a business to deduct it from. The private terminal at King County was a different world from the main airport. No security lines, no overhead announcements, no families arguing over luggage. Just a quiet lounge with leather chairs and a view of the tarmac through floor-to-ceiling glass, and a woman behind a desk who smiled like she was paid by the tooth. "Mrs. Caldwell, Mr. Roth is expecting you. The aircraft is on the apron." Vesper walked through the glass doors and onto the tarmac. And there it was. The Bombardier Global 7500. $70 million of aviation engineering painted in matte gunmetal gray, sitting on the concrete like a predator at rest. The engines were already spooling, a low whine that vibrated in her chest. The stairs were down. The lights were on. 3 days ago, Vesper had been eating ramen on a mattress on the floor. Now she was standing in front of a private jet. The contrast was so absurd it felt like a dream, the kind you have when you fall asleep on the bus and wake up disoriented, unsure which reality is the real one. This one was real. Alexander Roth was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He looked almost exactly as she remembered him. 12 years older, but wearing it like a well-tailored suit. Silver hair, dark eyes, the posture of a man who had never once doubted a decision. He wore a black turtleneck and dark trousers, the uniform of a man who had enough money to not care about fashion. He looked at her. His eyes went to her belly, prominent now, under the black Goodwill blazer, and then back to her face. "You look terrible," he said. "Hello to you too, Alex." That was not an insult. "You look like a woman who has been fighting a war. The question is whether you can keep fighting. I have been fighting pregnant, broke, and alone for 6 months. I think I can manage a boardroom." He almost smiled. Not quite. Alexander Roth did not smile. He acknowledged. "Ready?" "Ready." They walked up the stairs together, not side by side, Vesper first, Roth behind her. It was a small detail, but an important one. He was not leading her. She was leading. He was following. As Vesper reached the top of the stairs, she turned to look back at the terminal. The sun was breaking through the clouds, a rare Seattle phenomenon that felt deliberate, like the sky was adjusting the lighting for a photograph. And that is exactly what happened. A man was crouched in the bushes near the perimeter fence, 200 yards away. He had a camera with a telephoto lens the size of a small telescope. His name was Danny Voss, a freelance paparazzi photographer who made his living selling celebrity photographs to tabloid websites. He had been tipped off by a contact at the airport who had noticed an unregistered diplomatic aircraft and figured where there was an unregistered jet. There was a story. Danny raised his camera and fired off 30 frames in 8 seconds. The shutter clicked like a machine gun. Through the viewfinder, the images were gold. A woman, visibly pregnant, boarding a $70 million private jet. The man at the bottom of the stairs was recognizable to anyone who followed financial news. Alexander Roth, the ghost of Wall Street, the man who had not been photographed in public in over a decade. Danny checked his preview screen. The images were grainy but undeniable. He could see Vesper's profile, her belly, her jaw set in determination. He could see Roth behind her, his hand not on her back, not touching her at all, just present, like a business partner, like an investor. But the tabloids would not see it that way. The tabloids would see what tabloids always see: a story. Danny uploaded the photos to TMZ from his phone while still crouching in the bushes. He added a caption. "Exclusive. James Preston's pregnant ex-wife boards $70 million jet with billionaire recluse Alexander Roth." The photos hit the internet at 9:22 in the morning. By 9:45, the story was trending. By 10 o'clock, every major entertainment and financial news outlet had picked it up. TMZ ran it first, then Page Six, then Business Insider, then Bloomberg, which covered it from the financial angle. Roth Capital reemerges with apparent connection to Preston Dynamics whistleblower. The comment sections across the internet detonated like a chain of fireworks. Wait, he dumped his pregnant wife for an Instagram model, and she just got picked up by a billionaire? This man is the biggest fool alive. She is pregnant. He told her to get rid of the baby, and now she is boarding a $70 million jet. Karma. Alexander Roth has not been seen in public in 10 years, and he shows up for her. Whatever she has, I want some. This is not a Cinderella story. Cinderella waited for a prince. This woman brought a business plan. Team Vesper trended #1 on Twitter within an hour. Meanwhile, on the jet, Vesper knew nothing about the photographs. She was sitting in a cream leather recliner, reviewing the board presentation on her laptop, going over the numbers one more time because she never presented anything she had not checked at least 3 times. Alexander sat across from her, reading a financial report of his own. The cabin was quiet except for the hum of the engines. A flight attendant had offered champagne. Vesper had asked for water and prenatal vitamins. Alexander had asked for black coffee. "You know the public thinks I am your sugar daddy," Alexander said without looking up. "Let them think what they want. After the board meeting, they will know the truth." "And what is the truth?" Vesper looked up from her laptop. Her green eyes were clear and steady. "That I am nobody's charity case. I am the woman who is about to buy her ex-husband's company with his own debt." Alexander nodded. He appreciated precision in language the way a jeweler appreciates precision in cuts. The debt acquisition closed this morning. Phoenix Ventures now holds the majority position. As per our agreement, the entity is controlled by you. My firm provides the capital. You provide the strategy and the execution. And the board meeting? Scheduled for Thursday in Paris. La Défense. Tour. First building, 45th floor. James does not know we hold the debt yet. He thinks he is going to Paris to sign the European expansion. He thinks the board is going to rubber stamp his plan. When does he find out? When you tell him. Vesper looked out the window. The clouds were below them now, a white blanket stretching to the horizon. Above the clouds, the sky was clear and blue and endless. She had not been above the clouds in a long time. She had forgotten how beautiful it was up here, but she had not come here for the view. 3,000 miles away, in a penthouse in Seattle, James Preston was discovering the photographs. He woke up at 10:30, which was early for him these days. Lydia was asleep next to him, her mouth slightly open, her phone still clutched in her hand from whatever she had been scrolling through when she fell asleep. The penthouse smelled like last night's takeout, and the particular staleness of a life lived entirely for pleasure. James reached for his phone. He had 47 missed calls, 20 from Diana Mercer, his publicist, 12 from Gregson, his lawyer, 5 from the chairman of his own board of directors. The rest from numbers he did not recognize. His stomach dropped before his brain caught up. He called Diana first. She answered on the first ring. "James, have you seen the internet?" "I just woke up." "What happened? Did the stock drop?" "The stock is the least of your problems." Diana's voice was controlled, professional, exactly as it had been for the last 4 years. James did not know that behind that professional voice, Diana was smiling. She did not tell him that she was the one who had given Vesper the internal emails. She did not tell him that she had spent the last week preparing for this exact moment. She just did her job, which right now was to deliver the bad news. Your ex-wife was photographed boarding a private jet this morning. A Bombardier Global 7500 registered to a company called Phoenix Ventures. So what? She found some rich guy to... The man she was with is Alexander Roth. James went quiet. Alexander Roth, the man who has not been photographed in public since 2014. The man whose net worth makes yours look like loose change. And James, she is visibly pregnant in the photos. The internet is losing its mind. James got out of bed and walked to the window. Seattle stretched out below him, gray and indifferent. This does not change anything, he said. She is playing games. She found some investor to play hero, and she is putting on a show. James, the stock dropped 4% in the last hour. It will bounce back? Will it? Because Business Insider is running a story connecting Roth to the Medium article. They are calling her a whistleblower now, James. Not a crazy ex-wife. A whistleblower. Do you understand the difference? Crazy ex-wives are page 6 entertainment. Whistleblowers are front-page investigations. James hung up. He stared out at the skyline. Somewhere above those clouds, the woman he had thrown away was looking down on him. She is bluffing, he muttered. She does not have the guts. But his hands were shaking. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in the place where even narcissists keep their fears, he heard a whisper. It said, "What if she is not bluffing? What if the woman you called simple is the most dangerous person you have ever met?" The photos went viral because the world loves a Cinderella story. But this was not Cinderella. Cinderella needed a fairy godmother. Vesper Caldwell just needed a spreadsheet and a phone number. The glass slipper was a Bombardier Global 7500. And she did not find it at a ball. She earned it with a pitch deck. But before Paris, there was unfinished business. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 o'clock in the United States District Courthouse for the Western District of Washington, a stone building in downtown Seattle that smelled like old wood and accountability. The kind of building where lies went to die if you had the right judge. Vesper had the right judge. Judge Patricia Harmon was 61 years old, appointed by a Democratic president, and confirmed with bipartisan support, which told you everything you needed to know about her. She was fair. She was thorough. She had zero tolerance for theatrics, gamesmanship, or lawyers who thought they could substitute volume for substance. She had a reputation for reading every filing in advance, asking questions that made unprepared attorneys wish they had chosen a different career, and ruling from the bench, which meant she did not take months to deliberate. She listened, she analyzed, and she decided. Right there, right then. James arrived with 4 lawyers. 4. 2 from Gregson's firm and 2 outside counsel, hired specifically for this hearing, specialists in family law and restraining order litigation. They wore matching dark suits and matching expressions of expensive confidence. They carried briefcases that cost more than Vesper's monthly rent. Vesper arrived with Priya Vasquez, 1 lawyer, 1 legal aid attorney who earned $52,000 a year and had not slept more than 5 hours a night in 3 months. Priya was carrying a laptop bag, a stack of printed filings, and a flash drive that contained Diana Mercer's video deposition and every internal email that Diana had provided. Vesper was 7 months pregnant. She was wearing the black Goodwill blazer over a simple dark dress. Her hair was pulled back. She carried nothing in her hands. She did not need props. The courtroom was not full. Restraining order hearings were not usually spectator events, but word had gotten out, the way word always gets out, when something interesting is happening in a place where interesting things rarely happen. A few journalists sat in the gallery, a court sketch artist, A handful of curious attorneys from other cases who had suddenly found reasons to linger. James sat at the respondent's table with his legal team. He did not look at Vesper. He looked at the judge. "Good morning," Judge Harmon said, settling into her chair with the economy of a woman who did not waste motion or words. "This is the matter of Preston versus Caldwell. We are here on petitioner's motion for a restraining order and a preemptive motion regarding custody. Mr. Gregson, you may begin." Gregson stood. He was smooth, he was practiced. He laid out the case with the kind of polished certainty that comes from doing this 1,000 times. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Preston, has been subjected to a sustained campaign of harassment by Mrs. Caldwell. She has disseminated fabricated financial allegations to investors, regulatory agencies, and the media. She has engaged in a pattern of behavior that is consistent with acute psychological distress. We have submitted a professional evaluation from Dr. Leonard Moss, a licensed psychiatrist, which concludes that Miss Caldwell exhibits symptoms of delusional disorder and emotional instability that raise serious concerns about her capacity for parental responsibility." He presented the photographs taken by Carl Whitley, Vesper looking exhausted, Vesper crying in a parking lot, Vesper's apartment building. The narrative they constructed was clear. This was a woman falling apart. "We are not asking for punitive measures, Your Honor. We are asking for protection for my client and ultimately for the unborn child." He sat down. James nodded almost imperceptibly. Good. This was going well. Judge Harmon looked at Vesper's table. "Ms. Vasquez?" Priya stood. She was short. She was tired. She was outgunned by a ratio of 4-1. But she was prepared. And preparation is worth more than numbers in a courtroom. "Your Honor, I would like to begin with Dr. Moss's evaluation, which is the foundation of petitioner's entire case." "Go ahead." "Dr. Moss is not board certified in the state of Washington. He has been sanctioned twice by the state medical board, once for providing fabricated expert testimony in a custody case in 2019, and once for prescribing medication to a patient he had never examined in 2021. Both sanctions are in the public record." She placed the documents on the bench. Judge Harmon reviewed them. Her expression did not change, but her jaw tightened. "Furthermore, Dr. Moss never met my client, never spoke with her, never examined her. His 12-page evaluation is based entirely on surveillance photographs taken by a private investigator hired by Mr. Preston and on testimony provided by Mr. Preston himself. In other words, the petitioner hired a discredited psychiatrist to diagnose the respondent based on the petitioner's own description. This is not a medical evaluation. It is a character assassination with a letterhead." The courtroom shifted. The journalists leaned forward. Gregson's face remained neutral, but his pen stopped moving. "I move to strike Dr. Moss's evaluation from the record," Priya said. Judge Harmon did not hesitate. "Granted. The evaluation is struck. Mr. Gregson, if you have additional evidence to support the claim of mental instability, now would be the time." Gregson stood slowly. "Your Honor, the photographs demonstrate that a pregnant woman living alone on minimal income looks tired and occasionally emotional. If that constitutes mental instability, you would need to commit approximately half the mothers in America. Do you have anything else?" Gregson did not. "Ms. Vasquez, you may present the respondent's evidence." Priya inserted the flash drive into the courtroom's display system. Diana Mercer's video deposition filled the screen. Diana was composed, articulate, and devastating. She presented the internal emails one by one, James discussing the Meridian Shell Company with his CFO, James texting Gregson about burying the crazy ex-wife before she talks, James joking with Lydia about making the baby problem go away. James authorizing the diversion of Diana's salary to purchase a Birkin handbag. The courtroom was silent. The silence was the kind that has texture, heavy and electric. James's face went from confident to concerned to ashen. Priya spoke calmly. Your Honor, Mr. Preston is not seeking a restraining order because he fears for his safety. He is seeking a restraining order because he fears for his secrets. My client's forensic analysis of Preston dynamics has been independently verified by multiple financial professionals and is currently the subject of an active SEC inquiry, Mr. Preston's response was not to address the allegations, but to attempt to silence the person making them by fabricating a psychiatric diagnosis, intimidating a witness, and weaponizing the legal system against a pregnant woman. We also submit evidence that Mr. Preston's primary witness, Marcus Webb, was coerced into recanting his affidavit under threat of criminal prosecution by Mr. Preston's legal team. Mr. Webb has since confirmed this in a signed statement to the court. Priya placed the document on the bench. Marcus, consumed by guilt and contacted by Priya 3 days ago, had provided a full account of how Gregson had threatened him. He was not recanting his recantation exactly. He was explaining why he recanted in the first place. Then Vesper stood. She had not spoken yet. She had sat quietly through the entire proceeding, her hands folded on the table, her back straight, her expression unreadable. But now she stood, and the room adjusted to her the way a room adjusts when someone important enters it. Your Honor, I would like to make a brief statement, Judge Harmon nodded. Go ahead, Ms. Caldwell. Vesper walked to the lectern. She placed her hands on it. She took a breath. Your Honor, 8 months ago, I sat in a conference room and signed divorce papers in silence. I signed them because my ex-husband would not let me speak. I had something to tell him that day, something important. He cut me off and told me that I had nothing left to say that he wanted to hear. She paused. What I wanted to tell him was that I was pregnant. The courtroom inhaled collectively. He found out 6 weeks later. He told me to get rid of the baby. Those were his exact words. Get rid of it or deal with it yourself. She placed her hand on her belly. The baby was moving. She could feel the kicks, so I dealt with it myself. I moved into a studio apartment. I applied for jobs. I was rejected from everyone. I went to a free clinic for prenatal care because my insurance was canceled the day the divorce was finalized. I ate saltine crackers for dinner because that was what I could afford. And then I found evidence that my ex-husband was committing fraud. Securities fraud, embezzlement, misuse of pension fund money to buy jewelry for his mistress. I tried to handle it privately. I offered him a deal, child support, my mother's cancer treatment, and an acknowledgement of paternity. In exchange, I would stay silent. His response was to hire a private investigator to follow me, fabricate a psychiatric evaluation declaring me insane, and file motions to take my baby before she was even born. She stopped. The cramp came without warning, a sharp stab of pain across her lower abdomen. Her hand flew to her belly. She gasped. Her grip on the lectern tightened until her knuckles went white. The courtroom went dead silent. James's lead outside counsel saw an opening and took it. He stood halfway out of his chair. Your Honor, this is precisely the kind of emotional instability that our evaluation... Sit down. Judge Harmon's voice cracked through the courtroom like a whip. It was the first time she had raised her voice. It was terrifying. The lawyer sat down so fast he nearly missed his chair. Judge Harmon looked at Vesper with an expression that was not pity, but something harder and more useful. Recognition. Miss Caldwell, do you need medical attention? Vesper breathed. The cramp passed. She straightened her back. One hand stayed on her belly. She looked directly at the judge. I am not unstable, Your Honor. I am pregnant, 7 months pregnant, and I am standing in a courtroom defending my right to be a mother against the man who told me to abort this child. She paused. If that is instability, then every mother who has ever fought for her baby is unstable. Nobody moved. The court reporter's hands were frozen over her keyboard. A journalist in the gallery was openly wiping her eyes. Judge Harmon was quiet for 5 seconds. Then she spoke. The petition for a restraining order is denied. The motion for preemptive custody dismissal is denied with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. She turned to James's legal team. Her voice was ice. Additionally, I am referring Mr. Preston's conduct in this matter, including the fabrication of a psychological evaluation, the apparent intimidation of a witness, and what appears to be a coordinated effort to weaponize the legal system against a pregnant woman, to the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington for criminal investigation. She looked at James. Mr. Preston, I have sat on this bench for 19 years. I have seen ugly divorces. I have seen bitter custody fights. But I have rarely seen a more cynical abuse of this court's processes than what has been presented here today. You should be grateful that I am only referring this matter and not issuing sanctions directly. She picked up her gavel. We are adjourned. The gavel fell. The sound echoed off the marble walls like a period at the end of a very long, very ugly sentence. Vesper Caldwell stood in that courtroom, 7 months pregnant, cramping, facing 4 lawyers who wanted to take her baby, and she won. Not because she had money, not because she had power, because she had the truth and a judge who still believed in it. Now it was time for Paris. Paris. Tour First Building. La Défense. 45th floor. The conference room was a cage of glass and steel suspended over the gray skyline of the city. The view was spectacular if you cared about views. Nobody in that room cared about views today. James Preston sat at the head of the table. He had flown in the night before on a commercial first-class ticket because the company jet was grounded pending the SEC investigation. He wore a suit that cost $12,000. He looked composed, but under the table his leg was bouncing like a sewing machine needle. He had spent the night screaming at lawyers across 3 time zones. Every one of them told him the same thing. The debt has been purchased. If they call the loan, you are insolvent. You have to hear them out. The board members filed in. Elliot Thorne, his golf buddy, his loyal vote, would not meet his eyes. Sarah Jenkins, representing the pension funds, looked like she had been crying. Henri Delacroix, the French banking CEO, whose approval James needed for the European expansion, meticulously polished his glasses and refused to acknowledge James's existence. Let us not let recent events distract us, James said, his voice booming too loudly in the acoustic silence of the room. We are here to sign the European expansion. I have the papers ready. We sign, the stock recovers, everyone goes home richer. We cannot sign, James, Sarah said. Her voice was flat as a table. Why not? Because we have received a motion for a vote of no confidence, Henri said, sliding his glasses back onto his nose. Filed at 6 this morning. By who? I am the chairman. I own 40% of the voting stock. The double doors opened. You own 40% of a company that is currently in default. Vesper walked in. 7 months pregnant, $12 blazer from Goodwill. Hair pulled back, laptop in her hand, nothing else. No files, no entourage, just herself and the brain that had built this company from the beginning. Alexander Roth walked 1 step behind her, carrying a leather binder containing 1 document, the debt acquisition paperwork. Get out, James said. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Security! Two security guards by the door did not move. They do not work for you anymore, James, Vesper said calmly. She pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table and sat down with a slow, deliberate grace. You were 3 months behind on the security vendor invoices. Phoenix Ventures settled the outstanding balance this morning. They work for the creditor now. James looked at the guards. They looked at the floor. He looked at the board members. They looked at their hands. He sat down, slowly, like a man who has just realized that the floor is not as solid as he thought it was. Vesper opened her laptop. She did not yell. She did not gloat. She did not call him names or list his sins or tell him how much he had hurt her. She presented the facts the same way she had written the Medium article. Cold, clear, undeniable. The shell company, the hidden losses, the second mortgage used as personal collateral. The pension fund money spent on Lydia's diamond necklace. The cooked books going back 3 years. Every number verified. Every dollar traced. The board members watched in silence. Some of them had suspected. None of them had known the full extent. Now they did, and their faces showed it. Sarah Jenkins put her hand over her mouth. Henri Delacroix set his glasses down and closed his eyes. I am offering the board a lifeline, Vesper said. Phoenix Ventures, which I control through a partnership with Roth Capital, will inject $200 million into Preston Dynamics. We stabilize the stock. We save the pensions. We save 3,000 jobs. She paused. She looked down the length of the mahogany table at the man who had called her simple. The man who had thrown a $50,000 check at her like a tip. The man who had told her to get rid of their baby. In exchange, he goes. Immediately. Terminated for cause. No golden parachute. The vote was called. Henri raised his hand first. I vote for the motion. Sarah Jenkins followed. Yes. Elliot Thorne looked at James, his golf buddy, his drinking partner, the man who had promised him everything and delivered nothing. Elliot raised his hand. I have 3 kids in college, James. I cannot afford a bankruptcy. Yes. The remaining members raised their hands in sequence. It was unanimous. James sat in his chair, frozen. 20 years of empire building, of aggression and manipulation and taking and taking and taking, crumbled in 5 minutes. Vesper stood up. She walked the length of the table. Her footsteps were the only sound in the room. She stopped next to James. She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled, rain-stained check. $50,000. The check he had thrown at her across a table in Seattle 8 months ago. She had kept it. She had carried it through every bus ride, every laundromat night, every prenatal visit, every court hearing, not as a keepsake, as a reminder. She placed it gently on the table in front of him. I told you to keep it. You are going to need it. Your golden parachute is voided. Terminated for cause. Financial malfeasance. You leave with nothing. James stared at the check. $50,000. It was all he had now. The penthouse was mortgaged. The yacht was leased. The Mercer Island property belonged to the company. Lydia's necklace was evidence. Everything he had bragged about, everything he had lorded over Vesper, was gone. Vesper, he whispered, please, Lydia will leave me. If she leaves you because you are poor, James, she never loved you. And if you think money is the only reason someone stays, then you never understood me either. She turned to the security guards. Please escort Mr. Preston out of the building. She paused. And James, your daughter is due in 6 weeks. She will have my last name. James stood. He tried to straighten his tie, to summon some final shred of dignity. He walked toward the door. As he passed Alexander Roth, the older man simply checked his watch and said nothing. Some silences are louder than words. The doors closed behind him. Vesper let out a breath she had been holding for 10 years. Her shoulders dropped an inch. The baby kicked twice, hard, as if punctuating the moment. She walked to the head of the table. She sat in his chair. She opened her laptop. First item on the agenda, we owe the shareholders an apology for the last 5 years of mismanagement. Let us get to work. 1 year later, Columbus, Ohio, Ruth Caldwell's kitchen. The house had a new roof. That was the first thing you would notice. Pale gray shingles, clean gutters, no leaks. It was not the most dramatic symbol of change, but it was the most honest one. Ruth Caldwell was standing at the stove, making scrambled eggs and fuzzy slippers. Her hair was growing back in silver curls. She had gained weight. Her cheeks had color. The lymphoma was in remission, and the chemo had worked. The bills had been paid. In a bouncy seat on the kitchen table, baby Ruth Caldwell was grabbing at a stuffed bear with a crooked eye and a bow tie. The bear cost $1.50 from Goodwill. The baby cost everything Vesper had. Both were priceless. Baby Ruth had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She had 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that could wake the neighbors. She was perfect. Vesper sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing quarterly numbers for Caldwell Strategic Consulting. 14 clients, 2 full-time employees. An office in downtown Columbus that was a converted storefront with good light and a coffee maker that worked every time. Not a skyscraper, not a corner office in Manhattan, a storefront with good light. That was enough. That was more than enough. Her phone buzzed. An email from Forbes. Dear Ms. Caldwell, we would like to feature you in our annual 40 Under 40 list. She read it, smiled, closed the laptop. James Preston was serving 18 months in federal minimum security prison for securities fraud. In his cell, he received a package one Tuesday afternoon. Inside was a photograph. Baby Ruth at her first birthday party, face covered in chocolate frosting, grinning like the world was the funniest thing she had ever seen. On the back, in Vesper's handwriting, her name is Ruth. She has your eyes. She will never know your cruelty. But if you ever want to know her, you will have to earn it. Not with money, with time. James sat on his bunk, held the photo, and cried. Real tears for the first time in his adult life, whether it was remorse or self-pity, only he knew. But the tears were real. Lydia Marks left James 3 days after the Paris meeting. She moved in with a tech startup founder. He dumped her after 4 months. She now sold wellness tea on Instagram to 6,000 followers. Nobody cared. Marcus Webb never went to prison. After James's conviction, the threat evaporated. Nobody was pursuing the database access charges. Marcus sent Vesper a 5-page handwritten letter of apology. She read it. She did not respond for 6 months. Then she sent one line. I understand, but trust takes time. They were not friends again. Not yet. Maybe someday. Diana Mercer used her whistleblower settlement to start her own PR firm, specializing in reputation recovery for women leaving abusive situations. Vesper was her first client. They met for coffee once a month. Diana always picked up the check. Consider it back pay, she always said. Alexander Roth made a 280% return on his investment, exactly as Vesper had projected. He called her once a quarter to review numbers. Their last conversation ended with him saying, "The partnership offer still stands." Vesper replied, "I appreciate that, Alexander, but I have my own firm now. I will send you my rate card." He laughed and hung up. Professional respect, not romance, not rescue, Just two sharp minds who recognized each other across a conference table. Priya Vasquez was still at legal aid, still earning $52,000 a year. Still fighting, Vesper sent her firm a check every quarter, anonymous, but Priya knew. She used the first one to hire a second attorney. Vesper picked up baby Ruth, walked out to the front porch, sat in the rocking chair next to her mother. Ruth Sr. was shelling peas into a bowl. The autumn sun was warm on the new roof. The street was ordinary houses, ordinary lawns, a neighbor washing his car, the ice cream truck making its rounds 4 blocks over, its jingle faint and familiar. "Forbes wants to put me on a list," Vesper said. Ruth did not look up from her peas. "That is nice, honey. Hand me that colander." Vesper laughed. She held her daughter close and pressed her nose into the baby's hair, breathing in that smell, that indescribable baby smell that is part powder and part milk and part something that has no name, something that means home. She looked at the street. No penthouse, no Paris gala, no private jet, no billionaire on her arm, just a woman on a porch in Ohio with her mother and her baby and a roof that did not leak anymore. James Preston gave Vesper Caldwell silence. He thought it was a punishment. He thought silence meant defeat. But Vesper used that silence to think, to plan, to build. And when she finally spoke, the whole world listened. She did not need a billionaire to save her. She needed one to invest in her. There is a difference. One makes you a princess. The other makes you a CEO. But the voice Vesper cared about most was not on Forbes or Bloomberg or TMZ. It was the tiny one in her arms that had just learned a new word last week and used it constantly at all hours, at maximum volume, without any regard for context or timing. Mama. 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 James Preston buried her, but Vesper Caldwell was never a body in the ground. She was a seed, and seeds do not need a prince to grow. They just need rain. And if you made it this far, if this story made you feel something, if Vesper reminded you of someone you know or someone you are, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe if you have not already, and hit the bell so you never miss a story. And leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in Vesper's shoes? Would you have taken the $50,000? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have done exactly what she did? I will be reading every single comment, and I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. And remember, the people who try to bury you always forget that they are just planting seeds. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.